Well, with us in the studio, Jennifer Robinson, who is part of Julian Assange's legal team. Human rights campaigner Peter TATCHELL, who is a friend of Julian Assange, and Douglas Murray, who is a journalist and associate editor for the Conservative-supporting Spectator magazine, and debated publicly with Julian Assange back in 2011, and is a critic of WikiLeaks. Welcome, all of you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Jennifer Robinson, first of all, on what grounds are you going to argue that the arrest warrant for breaching those bail conditions should be dropped?
Well, the arrest warrant is actually in relation to the Swedish case, which has already been dropped, and the Crown Prosecution Service is attempting to use an old warrant to assert his arrest for breach of bail, which is a separate offence. Now,
but he did breach bail
in order to seek protection from Ecuador.
Sure.
And of course,
but he didn't turn up. He didn't report to a court when he was supposed to, so that is a breach of bail.
In order to protect himself from the risk, which has been our overriding concern the entire time, which is
it almost doesn't matter what the reason was, does it? He still breached the bail conditions.
And he's very willing to face British justice, but not at the expense or the cost of having to face American injustice. The UK government refuses to confirm or deny whether or not there's an extradition request. The CIA director has declared...
Sorry, you're mixing up two things. You say he's very willing to face British justice. If he is, why doesn't he simply step outside of the Ecuadorian embassy and face arrest then?
Because he's putting himself at the risk of a potential extradition request from the US in circumstances when the US Attorney General has said prosecuting him is a priority for the US government. Now, the UK government refuses to give an assurance or to confirm whether they have an extradition request, and unless and until we have that assurance, he's unable to deal with that, and we wouldn't want to see him put himself at that risk. That has always been our main concern.
Peter TATCHELL, what should happen to your friend now?
Well, first, let's just remember that Britain has an obligation under the Refugee Convention, which it has signed, to give political asylum and to recognise political asylum for those who have secured it. Julian Assange got political asylum from Ecuador in 2012. Therefore, Britain has a moral and legal obligation under international law to allow him to go to Ecuador. Not doing so...
Does he want to go to Ecuador? Is that where he wants to go?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Not doing so is in violation of our obligations under the Refugee Convention.
He could go to Ecuador. He literally has to walk out of that building and get on a plane and go. And face arrest, potentially, but he could make that decision himself.
Well, that would be a very foolish decision because he potentially faces life imprisonment in the US. We know that since 2010, a grand jury has begun investigations with the view of prosecuting him, with the prospect of a whole series of charges which amount to life imprisonment. A very foolish person would do that. So it is entirely sensible.
He knew that when he released US government secrets. He knew that was a possibility then.
Well, he may have known that, but no person would willingly put themselves in a situation where they would suffer or be at risk of suffering such a draconian sentence for telling the public about the secret activities of the United States government and military. Julian Assange, whatever you think about him, he has performed a great public service in shining a light on human rights abuses and diplomatic double standards by the US government. And for that, we ought to thank him. He is not a terrorist. He is not someone who has acted against the public interest. He's acted in the public interest by giving us, the public, the right to know what the US government has been doing in the name of the American people and indeed the people across the world.
Do you thank him for that service?
No, I don't. And I think it's a particularly partisan point. There are some people on the political left who always supported Assange when he was releasing information that was highly damaging to the United States of America. Interestingly enough, in the time that he's been in the Ecuadorian embassy, there's been a political shift also in his support. He now has a lot of supporters on the American right because he released a huge data dump of very damaging emails about the Clinton campaign that assisted Donald Trump's entry to the White House. What do both of these things have in common? Both of them clearly, and multiple investigations, among other things, by all three of the American intelligence agencies, confirm that the latter thing in particular was clearly facilitated by the Russian intelligence services. So I said this when I met him many years ago. It was clear to me, it was clear to anyone who analysed the work he was doing, there was one consistent thread. Everything he did was useful to the Russian intelligence services. I don't know whether he works for them. He certainly acts as a conduit for them. And for that, nobody who cares about freedom should remotely thank Julian Assange. One other thing, if I may say quickly. The specific issue of the Swedish rape accusations, because another thing has happened whilst he's been in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now, we quite rightly live in an era where we want to believe women when they say they've been raped. It seems a lot of women want to a lot of people want to believe women when they're raped in every case other than when they say Julian Assange raped them.
That was up to the Swedish prosecutors. They dropped them.
They dropped them not because they suddenly found out
because time ran out. Yeah, I know.
Because there was a statute of limitations which he knew would run out, and he stayed there until...
That's actually not correct.
So what is the correct situation with that?
He gave his testimony to the Swedish prosecutor, and after considering that testimony, they decided that the case ought to be closed. Now, that is...
In which one of the cases are you talking about, then?
In all cases.
The second case, they deliberately dropped the accusation.
OK, I want to ask you... Hang on a minute. I want to ask you about British taxpayers' money. People watching this programme have spent an awful lot of money on the police standing outside the Ecuadorian embassy for the last number of years in case he tried to escape. Surely there is no public interest now in continuing this arrest warrant because it's just going to spend more British taxpayers' money.
Firstly, I think that accusations that women bring about their rape should be treated seriously by this country, and I think that taxpayers can understand that. Secondly, I think that it is in taxpayers' interests to be interested in a man who has consistently acted as a conduit of Russian intelligence. That is not some weird niche interest. It is a very serious problem. It is a problem for this country and for our allies.
If you say that, what should he be charged with?
We shall see. I'm not a lawyer.
But you're making this allegation that he's acting as a conduit for Russian intelligence. What law has he broken?
We'll see.
You don't know.
No, I'm saying I'm perfectly willing for this to be judged by the British authorities. And I hope that you would be too.
Can I say that whatever we think about Julian Assange, he has served the equivalent of a 5.5-year prison term.
It was his choice.
His detention in the Ecuadorian embassy...
It's not detention. Hang on. He's chosen to be in there.
Well, the United Nations working group said that it was arbitrary detention.
He could walk out any day. You know that's true, Peter.
Let me finish my point. He has served the equivalent of a 5.5-year prison term. That is punishment enough. I think we need to move on because I can't see the public interest or public benefit in pursuing him further.
OK, let me bring Jennifer Robinson back in. By the way, some comments here. Michael, Julian Assange isn't being held. He's hiding out in order to evade justice. And Mark tweets this: Julian Assange of Russia WikiLeaks chose to be there. I have no sympathy for that narcissistic Russian agent. Is he a Russian agent?
Absolutely not. He's an editor and publisher of WikiLeaks.
How would you know?
He has already stated that he didn't receive the material from Russia, and indeed the New York Times said that they would have published the DNC material. So this was a clear information in the public interest and true information.
If he wins today, if this arrest warrant is dropped, might he choose to remain inside the Ecuadorian embassy for the foreseeable because of this fear you say he has about being extradited to the USA?
Precisely. We are very concerned that there is an extradition request that the UK refuses to confirm or deny. We suspect that it's waiting there and just waiting for the police to execute it once that he's in custody. This is a real concern. But what we do know is that the US has said it's a priority to prosecute him. We do know that the CIA director has said he shouldn't benefit from First Amendment rights and that they want to take WikiLeaks down. These are serious threats. No one can credibly deny that the US is not a threat to WikiLeaks and Julian Assange.
He's done a very serious thing in helping... You see, in saying you don't know if he's a Russian agent or you think he isn't, you ignore the more likely possibility, which would be consistent with other Russian intelligence operations, that they use go-betweens, and Mr. Assange doesn't even need to know, and he doesn't particularly care to ask the question about where these data dumps just come from, that just always help Russia, always help them, and of course, never once in all these years, never once has he released anything that is remotely critical of the FSB or any other agency of the Russian state. I wonder why that is.
OK. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.